Our final show keynote is a trailblazing entrepreneur in the performance apparel category. Joe Kudla launched Vuori a decade ago, right around the height of the athleisure boom. In his early days, Vuori was just months away from shuttering. Guided by customer feedback, Joe successfully overhauled the brand's marketing efforts, eventually leading Vuori to become a household name. Last year, Vuori received private equity investment that valued the business at $5.5 billion. Today, in conversation with Steve Dennis, host of the Remarkable Retail podcast, Joe will discuss how Vuori is blending digital, physical, and community. Please join me in welcoming Joe and Steve to the stage.
Joe Kudla. Joe, how are you today?
Doing good, Steve. Thanks for having me.
Well, start, I guess, where we must, which is tell us a little bit about Vuori, particularly. I think the origin story of the brand is particularly interesting, and then we'll flash forward a little bit.
Yeah. So Vuori launched in the spring of 2015, and it was really an extension of all the things that I love about being alive: fitness, exploring, adventure, mindfulness, connecting to nature, being in and out of the ocean. It was very much inspired by our community. I live in a little beach town called Encinitas. Quick show of hands, who's been to Encinitas, California? Okay. It's a beautiful town. It's home to a lot of professional surfers, triathletes, young families, creatives. And so we looked at this place and we were like, this is like the perfect inspiration for a brand. And my personal journey, I had hurt my back playing sports growing up, and a friend suggested I try yoga. I got into yoga practice, and I asked the question, like, what does a guy wear to yoga? And there just weren't a lot of options. If you think about the marketplace that we were in, studio fitness was exploding, yoga was exploding. There were 30 million people practicing yoga, and 30% of them were men, and they didn't have a brand. And then you think about, there was, in 2015, there were about 30 million or so men that were between the ages of 30 and 45, and about 50% of men in the US played sports growing up and exercised regularly. So that's a big audience of people that, in my opinion, didn't really have a lifestyle brand to hitch their wagon to. You had the big sporting goods brands, that were really footwear dominant. Their clothing really identified you as somebody to compete in somebody who was on their way to compete in a sport or go to the gym. And we were looking for a brand that more effortlessly would merge with our community in Encinitas. Like, it was more subtle. The fabrics were really soft. The color story was a little bit more muted and like kissed by the sun. And it was product that would both support you in a great workout, but also as product that you didn't feel like you needed to rush home and change out of. That was very much present in the women's market, but it didn't exist for men's. And so that's what we set out to create.
So I guess a couple follow-on questions there. One, maybe a little bit about the evolution, because a lot has happened since your sort of humble beginnings, but also the activewear world. I don't know if you like that moniker, but is pretty crowded. So aside from the particular Southern California inspiration and being men-focused, how have you crafted the differentiation as the brand has grown?
I mean, it's such a good question. This is one of the favorite questions that retail analysts like to ask us. It's like, well, what's the difference between Vuori and Lululemon? And the truth is, we both compete in the space, and there's distribution differences, there's brand differences, which Steve just pointed out. Vuori is very much born on the beach, and then there's product difference. And maybe it takes a product, a designer's eye to understand what those differences are, but to us, they're very clear. Vuori was born as a men's brand first. When my wife took me into my first Lululemon store, I was like, where's the men's product? And it was like over there in the corner. It didn't feel like an experience for me, so we built a brand for men first. Today, our business is 50-50 men's and women's, but at that point in time, we led very much with men's because we felt like it was an underserved market. For us, it's all about product. To have a business that breaks through in retail, you have to do so many things right. You have to execute well, you have to have great, compelling marketing, you have to build a great culture, but the most important thing is product is king, product is queen, it's everything. So at Vuori, we are really known for being fabric-led. And you could argue that Lulu is too, but our fabrics are very unique. And so for people that wear Vuori, they understand what I'm talking about. We had to spend a lot of time to get fabric right that allowed us to manifest the physical product that would align with our brand vision. And so I would say we're famous for fabrics, and I think we've institutionalized that, and that's where culture and people come into the equation. I spend a lot of time bringing talented people into our organization, aligning them behind vision, and institutionalizing our love for product. And I really do feel like that is the difference.
Just out of curiosity, when we first talked a few years ago, I learned that you didn't exactly start out as a retailer or product guy, and you've made this evolution from, you were CPA, is that right? What has that journey been like for you? And did you just fall in love with the product development process? Because you're obviously passionate about it. It obviously works really well at Vuori.
Yeah, I mean, my most important job at Vuori is I'm still our men's fit model. That's insane.
I applied for that job. Somehow I didn't get it.
A lot of people think that's crazy, but I think it's one of the most important things I do every day because it keeps me intimately connected to the product. But yeah, Steve's right. I mean, I started my career I studied accounting in school. I was supposed to start my career at Ernst & Young in the fall, and I had a summer break, and I had never left the country. And so I got an opportunity to go work as a model. My friends still love to give me a hard time about that. But I went to Milan for the summer that I had off, and I worked with all these incredible brands. And then instead of returning in the fall, I spent 2 years traveling around, working for these designers. And that was the first time that I was ever around retail, or I was never ever around design and product. And that was the first time I realized maybe there's a creative in there, in addition to like my analytical brain. And so when I returned, I went to work for Ernst & Young, a big CPA firm, and I think that has served me equally as well as my product obsession on this entrepreneurial journey. But I do think that being, the men's fit model, I sit right next to design and merchandising. I go on sourcing trips. My favorite days are a day where I can just flip through fabric all day long. I'm obsessed with the tactile sensibility and the inspiration that a fabric can bring. And I think that I've surrounded myself with wildly talented people that feel the same, that share that passion for product and for textiles. And I think if the one thing that I would speak to is why we've become successful, it's not because of me as a designer, it's because we have a shared obsession over making great stuff.
Yeah, well, it seems to be working pretty well.
Thank you.
Let's talk a little bit about your growth strategy. I'm curious, because you've been doing, obviously you're online, you've got your own stores, you've got some wholesale partners. Maybe just kind of take us through the evolution. I don't know that you necessarily think of yourself as a digitally native brand or some of the other brands that have been through this conference, I'm sure, over the last decade, but a little bit about that journey and how you think about it and how it's evolving.
Yeah, so a little fun story. First thing I did when I got my samples for our first collection is I got on a plane, I came to New York, and I wheeled a little bag around, and I got some meetings with buyers, because we were not a well-funded company. We started our business in a garage, and we raised a little bit of friends and family money. And so I got some meetings with some wholesale accounts. We never thought we were going to be a pure play D2C brand. That wasn't the strategy. The strategy was to be a multi-channel business, and we were going to embrace wholesale because the contribution from wholesale could help us fund our customer acquisition strategy over here in the e-com world. I came to New York, I got some meetings, and they looked at our product and they said, this is never going to sell in New York City. And I went home with like my tail between my legs. But today, that same buyer is still the buyer at that account, and we're the #1 performing activewear brand at that business. And so it's been an incredible journey, but the reason I share that is because our intention was to be multi-channel. But the market told us else what? It was a classic chicken or the egg kind of situation where, from we needed wholesale to help kind of fund our D2C business and build awareness, but the wholesalers wouldn't take our calls because we hadn't built a community. We didn't bring anything to the table.
Right.
And they looked at the product and they're like, we don't really know if you're trying to be a beach brand or like a sportswear brand or an activewear brand, so we don't even know where to put this on our floor. So that was its own challenge, also the opportunity. But we were almost out of business. I mean, we were literally months of cash left, and we said, okay, forget wholesale for a moment, put it on pause. We're going to put all of our effort towards a D2C strategy. And we were able to be early. Timing is a lot of this equation as well. And we were early in advertising on Instagram and Facebook. I think Instagram started their ad platform in like late 2013, and we launched in the spring of 2015. So we were like a year into advertising on Instagram. And so we were able to build a business, and it wasn't overnight. We had to define our engine and our comms and how we spoke to the brand. But the beauty of having a direct relationship with the customers, we could learn, and you guys all know this, but we quickly learned that our initial comms around how we were speaking to our product was actually wrong. The customer loved other things about the brand. So we made adjustments on the fly, and we were able to define a little engine of growth. And then we were able to send product out to micro-influencers and build this tribe of people online who are working out in our product, and it looked different than traditional fitness brands. And all of a sudden, you could start seeing this community form online, and then those same buyers that, couldn't really see the vision, we helped them see it. And then they embraced Vuori, and we had really incredible success in wholesale, and largely because of all the digital advertising we were doing to try to sell product on our website. It was clear that customers don't really care what channel they purchase your product in. For them, it was more about convenience and where they were shopping. So if you saw a digital ad, maybe you were hesitant to convert on some Instagram brand, but then when you walked into Nordstrom or REI or Equinox, you had more familiarity. So our sell-through was really strong, and we really built the business as a wholesale and e-commerce business.
But now you've got quite a few. I think you're on your way to 100 of your own stores. So can you talk a little bit about how that strategy has evolved and how the digital and physical pieces of that work together?
Yeah, absolutely. So retail started early for us, albeit very small. We opened our first pop-up store in 2015, the first year that we launched our business. And that's when we learned the power of providing an experience and building community around our stores. Today we have 80 stores, but we still bring with us a lot of the lessons that were learned in that early pop-up around providing value to a community and using your retail team to get outside the four walls of your store and get out into the community and build real relationships. So today, yes, we have 80 stores and growing. We'll be over 100 by the end of this year. Every store is its own little marketing engine in the communities that we serve. And so when I look forward, retail will play a huge role in our growth strategy, both here in the US as well as abroad.
Are there any things that have surprised you about, I often say digital drives physical and vice versa, at least for most companies. Is there anything you've learned in particular that surprised you about the interaction between online and maybe your wholesale partners as well?
I wouldn't say I've been surprised, but the data has definitely validated a lot of the assumptions that you would naturally think to be true, which is, a customer that originates in a store tends to be more valuable than a customer that you acquire digitally. The magic is when you can then convert that customer to become an omni-channel customer and shop both channels, then that customer is worth like 3x a single channel customer. And so that makes sense, right? You come into a store, you have a great experience, you get exposed to a much broader assortment of product, you get to try on things and touch and feel. And that experience has a longer lasting impression than interacting with digital content, in my opinion. And that's what the data has shown us to be true. And we find that we have a better chance of converting a customer to an omni-channel customer when they originate in a store.
Yeah. I think a lot of brands are, I don't know if that's surprising, but I think I've seen that with a lot of clients and whatnot. I'd like to go back a little bit to the social media strategy. You talked about how Instagram and Facebook really helped you build that back when it was perhaps a little cheaper to acquire customers that way. But you've done quite a lot with social media and just other forms of social shopping. I know Livy Dunn and some other, sometimes you show up in some of those things as well. What's the role of social media or social shopping in the brand today? How have you seen that evolving? Any real interesting lessons of the last year or two?
I think it's becoming It's always been important. It's always been important to us, albeit we didn't have a big budget in those early days. And so we would work a lot with micro-influencers. As a matter of fact, the first almost year of our social feeds, it was all just UGC because we just sent product out and we got content creators and influencers wearing our product, and they didn't require a lot of investment to do so. Today, that world has changed. But partnerships, especially at our level of scale, they're playing a bigger and bigger role as media becomes more competitive. I was talking to Kim, who you guys probably heard from, and she was talking about the challenges that Meta's having with all of these LLMs, clicking on ads and digesting content. We've definitely seen a challenging Meta environment, and you can almost look at a 10-year chart of the effectiveness of advertising digitally, and it's more competitive. Privacy is changing. And so you have to find ways to connect with people, and partnerships are a big part of that strategy. I think it's not a nice to have, it's a must in our world, and it's a multi-tiered system. You have partnerships at all levels of the funnel. You have your tier A, your big macro, and those could be influencers, celebrities, athletes. You have content creators and key opinion leaders, and then you have affiliates. And I think it's important to have. What's important to me is that we build a partnership engine that we can really institutionalize and make sure that we're working with the right partners, because it's not about how many followers they have. There has to be an organic connection with the brand, an authentic connection with the brand. Consumers are too smart. And so you have to work with people who naturally already love your product and then just amplify that story.
Sure. So I want to shift gears a little bit. We don't have much time left, but I'm curious from a leadership perspective, going from super entrepreneurial, ratcheting up all these different partnerships to now going to be at 100 stores, growing with these wholesale partners. The business is much more complex. As a leader, what have you learned? What has changed in that journey?
I mean, I think one of the most important things that I've learned is that vulnerability is really important. And I do not ever pretend that I understand how to run a multi-billion-dollar global business. Like that, I wasn't a professional manager. I wasn't trained in a big retailer. So I'm learning on the fly. I think it's really important that my leadership team knows that and understands that about me. And that, I think, by being vulnerable in that way, I think it sets a tone that we don't want leaders that carry big egos in our building. And I think that naturally diffuses down into every touch point, including our stores. And so, for me, it's been a constant learning. I'm learning and being stretched in new ways, and it's a beautiful gift. Nothing kind of connects you with the human spirit in the way that the entrepreneurial journey does. And so that's such a gift. But when I think about how my job has changed, some things are very different and some things are the same. I today am a very big, I spend a lot of time in recruiting. I spend a lot of time around values and ensuring that we're bringing in wildly talented people that are aligned by our vision for our company and what our priorities are, both long-term, near-term. So I spend a lot more time communicating across a big company to try to find alignment. So that's different. But the one thing that's the same is at the end of the day, like what we do can be boiled down. I mean, it's complex, global supply chains. It's very difficult, especially this year. But when you boil it down, what are we really trying to do? We're trying to make great products. So I stay obsessed on product. I stay involved, and my team can feel that passion. So that's really important. You got to take really good care of customers, and you got to tell really compelling stories, provide a really great experience, treat people well. And so I try to stay focused on the right priorities.
Well, it sounds simple, but hard to do, right? A lot of times. All right, well, we're just about out of time. One last question, and then we'll hit our takeaways. What's next for Vuori? What's on the roadmap that you're really looking forward to?
Speaking product first, we're expanding the assortment. And like this fall, you're going to see a much broader range of outerwear, which is just really exciting. Being a product junkie, I'm just so excited to enter new categories while also being disciplined. Vertical retail expansion. The beauty of having built an e-com business first is we have so much data to tap into to inform how we roll out stores. And so you're going to see a lot more Vuori stores across the country. And then, we've been taking Vuori outside the US. We just opened our 3rd store on Regent Street in London, which we're incredibly proud of. We opened our 3rd store in Shanghai, and we're going to be opening our next store in China, in Beijing later this year. And then we're expanding in Seoul as well with our first standalone store in Korea later this year. So really excited to see Vuori expand beyond our little beach town of Encinitas.
Yeah, well, it's a great story. We've got our takeaways up there. In the interest of time, I won't run through them, but I'm wondering, Joe, as you look at the list, if there's anything you wanted to just double back on or something we didn't cover that you wanted to mention. If not, we'll let everybody get on with their day.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with everything that you say here. So, great job.
Good enough. Thank you. Thank you.
But great product.
All
I mean,
right.
it is the differentiator. You can have great marketing, great teams, great culture, great everything. The world doesn't need more crap. Make great product.
There you go. That's the Instagram story.
Yeah.
The world doesn't need more crap. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Joe.